This is Gemara Yevamos Daf Ayin Aleph. All the learning has been sponsored as an incredible schos for Shlema for Chadvalei Abbas Saradina Amir Hashem. The learning the entire Chabura. Our tefillah is our Torah should bring Chadvalei Abbas Saradina home and ultimately to a complete recovery, as well as learning Shvius Chosur V'Sochaim Dvar Tamzivas Baruch Hashem Levizava Ovim Intelligent and Chayv Lemuz Bas Sima Malka, as well as for Hashem Shayus and your faith Shmom Mentila Naftal Sim Mechletz and Chom Vasivas Arblum Bas Mindel Chayim Yeshua Ben Malka Vashavik Shechana B'Soich Shar Chayli Yisrael. We're holding on the bottom of Ayin Omid Beis. 2 lines from the bottom, and the Gemara now begins by following up from yesterday's Gemara, in which yesterday we learned that the word boy is a limiting word. Ask the Gemara, now that you taught me that the word boy, the word it, of it comes to teach me a drasha, udasa, kol ben nechar lo yoichal boy. It says with regard to the carbon Pesach, no ben nechar, no estranged person should eat of it. What is the lama li boy? What is the word lamali? Why do we need it? Explains the Gemara. Boy, you know what it comes to teach us as we turn over to today's daf. Daf Ayin Aleph, Amid Aleph. Boy, Amar as das, boy sells. With regard to boy, it's the Karban Pesach. That's when Amar as das, when it goes off the derech, as Rashi explains. That is why he is possible the Karban Pesach. When Amar as das sells a meiser, but such an attitude, such a situation does not answer one from eating meiser sheni. Baruch atah Adonai. Continues the Gemara. Call Arul lo yoichal b'lamali. Another pasuk. It says that no Arul, anyone without a bris milah, should not eat from the Karban Pesach. Why do we need that pasuk? Explains the Gemara. Boy in a yoichel. Aval b'matzah mar, but he's allowed to eat. One without a bris milah still allowed to eat the matzah the mar. V'yitzruch, and explains the Gemara. We need both psukim to teach me the one who goes off the derech and one without a bris milah specific to Karban Pesach is possible, but not to meiser, not to matzah, not to mar. Explains the Gemara. Itzchach lemichtav arol, itzchach lemichtav kol ben nechar. Because of Rachmana arol, if it only said the din of arol with regard to Pesach versus matzah mar, that one without a bris milah does not eat the Karban Pesach, but yes eats matzah and mar. I would have thought why? Because it's a din, it's specific detail about one without a bris milah demais. He's disgusting. He's disgusted in the eyes. Oh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Avol ben Nechar, but one who unfortunately goes off the derech, Zoloi Ma'is, he's misled, he's misguided, but he's not Ma'is. Ma'is is something that there's an inherent issue with him, one without a bris milah. Emalai, I would think that a ben Nechar, one who goes off the derech, would have a different din. Because Rachmana Kol ben Nechar, I would have thought Shavdei Liba Lashamayim. He has a fundamental emunah, his relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is flawed. It's a Liba Lashamayim. Avol Arul, to Liba Lashamayim. One without a bris milah, it's true, he might have an inherent flaw, his body might be repugnant and moist, but is he's connected, he just has an issue. That's what we need. Both psukim. Continues the Gemara. Why by Karban Pesach mimenu lamali? Why do we need the psukim to teach me? You're not allowed to eat mimenu from it. And it says mimenu in another pasuk. As the psukim on the side here point out, al tachlu mimenu na mavushal uvashal mavushal b'mayim kim sliish roishai al karov v'kirbov. Explains the Gemara. Lich the Rabba Omar Rav Yitzchak Kushemir Tashem. We're going to get to that drasha in 2 more days. We added him Sachim, but we'll get it on Daf Ayin Daled. So Amar Mar, we're 10 lines from the top. Ayin Aleph, Amar Aleph. Now the Gemara goes back to what we spoke about yesterday. Ayin Amar Aleph. The sheet of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, Imer Inoi Tzarich. Says Rabbi Akiva, you don't need the Gzeira Shava that we learned yesterday to teach me that a Arel, one without a bris milah, is not allowed to eat Truma. Why not? Says Rabbi Akiva. Hareyu Imer Ish Ish, the rabbi says Arel. Because the Torah, when it said Ish Ish, is the one that eats from, that does not eat from Truma, that comes to include the Arel, that Arel is not allowed to eat from Truma. Ask the Gemara of Ima the Rabbi says Ainin. How do you know it includes Arel? Maybe it includes Ainin in the drasha, very similar to yesterday's Gemara, as we're going to see. Amar Rabbi Yisrael Chanina Amar Krav Chol Zar Zarus Amar Tilacha V'lo Yaninus. Ema asked the Gemara of Lo Arelos. Asked the Gemara, how do you know? Maybe the way to darshan is that it's coming to teach me and not one that is an aral. Haksiv ish. And the classical kashama rois. How do you know one is included and one is excluded? How do you know what to include and what to exclude? Explains the Gemara mistavra. There's a svara. Arelos ularabuyi. It makes sense. It is logical that we're going to include one who is an aral, one without a bris milah. He is included in the Isser. Why? What is special? What is unique? What is stringent about one without a bris milah shekain? Maisim Krusim Medavar Avid, as Gemara explains, Mechoser Maisi doesn't have a bris milah, Maisa Begufa, it's an act in his body. Vainish Kares. And finally, the Yeshel of Nea Adibar, who was around before the giving of the Seres Adibar, is number 5. Umayla Mila Schar Bavadim Akaves, and the Mila of the children and the Avadim are Ma'akivim for being the carbon Pesach. So lack of Mila is a very stringent flaw, and that's the reason why it's Mistaver, says the Gemara, to include it in the Esser. Ask the Gemara, what do you mean? Adarabba. Aninos Avli the Rabbi. You know why? Because Aninos is also Chamer. Shkiniashta Bakol Shah. V'negis Banashim and Nashim. Ve'biyatol Atakin Etzatzmai. And answers the Gemara like we explained yesterday, Hanoch Nefishin. This one is more, there are more Chumras with regard to Arul than Aninos. And that is why ultimately Arul is included in the Esser and not Aninos. Comes along the Gemara with another answer. Why, when the pasuk says ish comes to include that an aral is included in the iser, and it does not come to include an einain. Again, with regard to eating truma, included in the iser, that an aral is not allowed to eat truma. Rava Amar b'loy hanach nefisha nami loy matzis amrit. Even without all the reasons. Why? Amar kra ish. Ezeu davar, the double ish. Honey, it's a din about an ish. Where do we find a din that is unique and specific to the man and not a woman? Aninos, the din of an einin is both men and women, but aral, that's the din of the bris milah, it's din only in men. So says Rava, that's what the Torah clearly is pointing to. For Rabbi Kiva, and says the Gemara, that according to what we just learned a moment ago, that one with an aral, one without a bris milah is not allowed to eat truma. So ask the Gemara, Rabbi Kiva, what does he do with Taisha v'Isachar? Yesterday's Gzeira Shava. Amar Shemaya Lasui Arvei Mol v'Givayni Mol. You know what he comes to include? That not only is a yin without a bris milah not allowed to eat the Karban Pesach, but even an Arab with yes a bris milah or a Givayni with yes a bris milah. So we're learning now. It's not a din whether there is the physical act of milah or not. Because a guy could have a milah, they could have a circumcision, but doesn't have a din of a milah. So says the Gemara, not only is an aral of Yisrael in the Isser, but so too an Aravi mol, the Gavayni mol, are not allowed to eat the Karban Pesach. Ask the Gemara, what do you mean? The question that's bothering all of us, they don't have a din of a milah. You're right, they're circumcised, but they don't have a din of a bris milah. But Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, we're about 20 lines to the wide lines. The first word line is Tanan. Someone makes a neder, someone says, I'm not going to get any benefit that from one who is an aral mutar ba'arili Yisrael. Because the fact that they have a bris milah is irrelevant by the Koyim. So says the Gemara, so at the end of the day, what's it coming to include? You thought it's coming to include an Arab, it's coming to include a Gevayni. Says the Gemara, it can't, because these are people, they might have the physical circumcision, but they don't have a din of a Gemal, they don't have a din of one with a bris milah. Elala, Suye, a different person. Ger, Shemov, Loital, Vekatan Shenoilik Shumal. 2 cases that the person has a bris milah, the child's born with a bris. The Ger underwent the circumcision, the bris, but he didn't go to the mikvah. V'kasavar, and this is the opinion that holds that in the aforementioned 2 cases, what do you have to do? Sarach lahatif mimenu dabris. You have to do, there's a little bit of an incision to let some of the blood come forth, and therefore without that they don't have a din of a bris milah. Says the Gemara, let's go back to Rabbi Eliezer of yesterday. Let's understand why Rabbi Eliezer says, that when the Torah says Taisha v'Sacher is Gzeira Shava. Explains the Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer argues, and he says if the ger, once he has that milah, he has a din of a ger. Because Savar, and din number 2, Rabbi Eliezer holds. It's a large discussion, but says Rabbi Eliezer, he has a din of a milah, and he does not even have to do the incision to let the blood come forth. Says the Gemara, but beautiful, but what does he do with the pasuk? He says, no, the Torah just wrote it ish not to teach us anything. That's just the way that people talk. And that really ends off the yesterday's shir. That really wraps up all loose ends from yesterday. But now says the Gemara, 10 lines of the white lines of Ayin Aleph Amar Aleph, Boi Rav Chama bar Ukva. Akasha. Katan Arel Maul is Seichai B'Shemen Shal Chuma. A Katan, who's an Arel, he doesn't have a bris milah. Is he let to smear himself, or you let to smear him with the oils of Truma? And as Rashi here points out, that the shayla over here is predicated on the fact that we say that sicha is kishtiya, that anointing is a din of drinking, and you're not. And the question is, we just learned the one without a bris milah cannot get benefit from the Truma. Can I get benefit? Can I eat the Truma? So I asked the Gemara of a katan without a milah, is he included? Is he allowed to be anointed and rubbed with the oils of Truma? And the Gemara now quantifies what exactly is our shayla. Is an arul shaloi bizmana, not at the appropriate time. What does that mean? Rashi points out what's going on over here is that this child is not yet 8 days old. This child is not yet 8 days old, and therefore explains Rashi, the fact that we have an arul shaloi bizmana, is that ma'akif? Does that hold back, and does that say that he's not allowed to eat truma? He's not allowed to, by definition, be rubbed by the oil of truma? Or loy ma'akva? At the end of the day, he doesn't have the chiyuv of bris milah. So how can you tell me as the din of an arul, and therefore he cannot get benefit? Amar Rav Zira answers, Rav Zira told Shema, in the elamila zchara b'shas asiyah, v'avoda b'shas achila. Says Rav Zira that when it comes to rubbing the oils on this child, it's only aser. I'll tell you a raya. Ein li ela, if there's a milah of the Eved, Amila Zecharav, of the children, B'shas Asiyah, which we'll see what it means, Ve'avada B'shas Achila. So, Minayin Lidin is Amr Shal Zeh V'Shal Zeh. So says the Gemara, we have Mekairais of 2 stages, the Asiyah, the shechting of the Karban Pesach, and the Achila, the eating. Says the Gemara, what's the proof that we equate the 2 stages, and when did that apply to A applies to B, and B applies to A? Ve'ez Amr Shal Zeh V'Zeh Ta'amalei Azaz the Gzeir Shava. So whatever is going to apply to the din of if one could be allowed to shecht the Karban Pesach will be applicable to the din of eating the Karban Pesach and vice versa. So now this is the Rayo. We could have a potential case of an Eved Mishkachas La, 2 lines to the white lines. This now b'shas achila, this now b'shas asiyah. It makes a lot of sense. How can you have an Eved that is around when you're eating the Karban, even though he wasn't there at the Shechita? He was purchased between the time of the Shechita and the eating of the Karban. But as the Gemara, we equated an Eved and a Zachar, a male child, this now b'shas achila, this now b'shas asiyah. Heichi Mishkachas La, how is that possible? Is in the case not that he was born between the eating of the Karban and the shechting, or say better, the shechting and the eating between the 14th Erev Pesach in the afternoon and the nighttime. That's when this baby is born. And if that would be the case, and we have Gzeira Shava, including him Shema Mina Reilush Leibizmana Havya Reilus. So it would be a raya that even though he didn't get to eat yet, he just was born. But he's a din of an arul, he doesn't have a bris milah yet, and therefore it's a din of an arul, you will not be allowed to eat, and by definition be rubbed with the oils of Truma. Amar Rava says, Rav Zira, you went a bit too fast. V'tizvara, hamoloi kol zachar amar achmana. State in the Torah, what do you do? Give a bris milah. And then says the Torah, Yaakov La'asai, bring the Karban Pesach. So it's clearly in that progression. So someone who doesn't have the Chi of bris milah because he's not 8 days old is certainly not included in these dinim. But I love Rami Ilu. And says the Gemara, beautiful. So what do we must be talking about in the Brisa? Going 2 lines to the bottom. Chama, a child that had a fever, and now the fever left him. So he did not get the bris milah yet because he wasn't able to until now. So when the Karban Pesach was shachted, he wasn't able to have a bris milah because he had a fever. Now the fever broke. So this child, he has a din of an aral. Will he be included in the achila or not? Asked the Gemara of an Esav Leikol Shiva. I don't understand. We should give him 7 days to recuperate. And so explains the Gemara, you're right. So if that's the case, so if we're talking about that, the kid was really born 7 days ago, and now we're sitting on the morning of the bris milah. So says the Gemara, I don't get it. It's Erev Yom Tov, it's Pesach, it's busy, but give a bris first thing in the morning, and then the child will be around and will have a milah both at the time of the shechita of the Karban Pesach and at the asiyah, the achila, of the eating. Explains the Gemara, Binan, we need in such a scenario, which happens to be so large, halach l'maisa that comes in this line, you need ace at any time. A child is sick and then gets better. You need 8 days from when the child got better. So explains the Gemara. My lad, the Luda taught us that someone's name, that the day the child gets better has the same day as if it's his birth. My lab. Says the Gemara, 1 second, we know if a baby's born 1 minute before Shkia, 8 days later he gets a bris first thing in the morning. Was that 8 complete days, 7 complete days? Of course not. But we hold that it doesn't make a difference. So ask Glu Hada, I don't understand. The day that the child got better, it should be the same thing. Explains the Gemara, the day of Habrasa, the day that the child recovers, is even greater than the day he was born. Why? That happens to be generally the halach l'maisa of a child's born, and for example, he's on medication, etc. For a few hours, the bris will often be done ace le'ace, meaning if the child went off antibiotics at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, the bris will be at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. Sometimes you wonder, I don't understand. We know the concept of reason makdim the mitzvah, and then you find out there's a bris being held at 2 in the afternoon, and you're wondering why. This might be the reason, because the baby was born with a minor issue, was on medication, and therefore the baby will not have the bris until 24-hour time periods, 8 days later. Says the Gemara, second teretz, in what's the case over here, that there's a child that's an aral, that's between the achila and the asiyah of Abba Amrikam, the kaivla ein elianuka, v'istabach b'ni yabeni. The child had an ailment, his eyes were hurting him, and it got better between these 2 time periods, the shechita and the achila. Rav Amar, third teretz, his parents were unfortunately incarcerated in jail, and therefore they were not able to perform the bris milah. They had a shliach do the Karban Pesach, but now when they come home on Erev Yantiv, they have to now deal with the bris milah. But now the child, the time of the shechita, didn't have the milah, but now by the achila, well, yes. The case is that when Zachar Beini Ubeini, that when the Karban Pesach was shechted, the kid was a tomtom. You didn't know if he was male or female. Then they ripped it open. They did a surgery, and it emerged that he was indeed a male. Now he will be alive at the time of the achila, even though he was not a regular yid at the time of the asiyah of the shechita. He did not have a milah at that moment. Rav Shravya Amar Kon Shasiyah Rosh Chutz LaProsder says Rav Shravya an interesting answer. A final teretz. The case is the fetus, the child, the baby stuck his head outside of the mami on the 7th of Nisan, but wasn't fully born until 7 days later, and it was only fully born when? After the father did the shechita. So this is the case of a child being in between the shechita and the achila. Says the Gemara, what? Could a child live in such a precarious situation with his head sticking out of the mami? A beautiful science. The moment the baby comes into the world, niftach asasum, that which was closed opens up his mouth, and that which was open is closed and evil. So he no longer gets nourished from the mommy in the moment the head comes out. So ask the Gemara, if it's not getting nourished by mommy, how can this baby live for 7 days? Answers the Gemara, Shamalei Kain, and the reason for this creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, you wouldn't be able to live even 1 moment. The Shachas is one of the Pshatim. In the Shachas of Asher Yatzar, you wouldn't be able to live 1 moment, just like when the baby is born. You can't live for 1 moment if the mouth was closed. We know that first cry of the baby, what could be more beautiful, because it shows that his mouth is open, the airways are working. Explains the Gemara, the case is where the baby had a fever. And Rashi and the Mefarshim explain that the fever at some level sustains and feeds the child. We know that when one is sick, he doesn't have such an appetite, doesn't really need much nourishment. The fever himself sustains him. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Ishta Deman, about 15 lines down. First word line is Deman. Ilim Ishta Didei, the child was sick. Ask the Gemara, if the child was sick, you have to wait 7 more days after the child gets better, like we saw. El Dezante Ishta Deime, the mother had a fever, and the mother's fever enables the child to live even without nourishment. A fascinating detail of creation. Another territory. The case that you're talking about is only when the child does not cry. When the child cries, he's surely going to be able to live, even though he's sitting within this situation, hanging out of the mother. A new din. Says the Gemara, once we're on the topic of Arul, we just finished the 5 different truths how to answer up the Braisa of this child that's being around at the time of the Achilas Karban Pesach, even though it was not alive at the time of the Shchitas Karban Pesach. But comes along Rabbi Yochanan Misham Rabina, comes along with a new din related to the Tzugya of Arul. Arul Mekabel Azah Shkin Matina Babasina Shekibla Azah Kshin Arilim. An Arul, one without a bris milah, is able to accept and be purified through the Hazah, the sprinkling of the ashes of the Chatos of the Parah Adumah. Just like Klal Yisrael, as we'll see in a moment in the Midbar, they as well received the sprinkling of the Parah Adumah, even though they were Arelim. Shenamar says in the Torah, they went up from the Yarden. This is in the Pasuk in Yeshua. On the 10th of the month, the Rishon, the first month, the first month, the end of the first month. On the 10th of the month, we know they did not circumcise themselves because they were too weak from traveling. And when did they do Hazah to purify themselves? So we see the Gemara says, Arayo, you can become purified even when you don't have a bris milah. Ask the Gemara, wait. Well, maybe that year they didn't have the Karban Pesach at all. Says the Gemara, don't suggest that. It says in the Nach, V'yasu Pesach, they made the Karban Pesach. Maskiv Lomar, Zutra continuing, V'doma Pesach above Tomaya. How do you know? Maybe they brought the Karban Pesach, but they never were purified. You're trying to prove Rabbina's din that you're able to accept the ashes of the Parah Adumah without a bris milah. Maybe they ate the Karban Pesach that year b'toma, because they had no choice. Says the Raisa Malu, they got a bris milah v'tavlu, they went to the mikvah, then v'asu b'scheim v'tayra, a clear cut raya. I will conclude with Amar Rabba Bar Yitzchak Amar Rav Lo Ninna Priya Mila LaAvraham Avinu. The din of Priya, of uncovering the circumcision, was not given to Avraham Avinu Shenamar. Va'isahi Amar Hashem El Yoshua. At that moment, Hashem said to Yoshua, sharpen the knives to yourself and give Klal Yisrael a second bris milah. Ask the Gemara 1 minute. Maybe Hashem is telling Yoshua to sharpen the knife and give a milah to any year that did not have a milah yet. Says the Gemara, as we see, that they all had a bris milah in Mitzrayim. Explains the Gemara, what does Hashem mean to Yeshua? Sharpen the knife and shov and return to do the bris milah. Clearly he's referring to one who already had a bris milah. The priya is referring to the additional stage of priya, the uncovering. That is what Yeshua is being commanded on to be done. What does it mean a second time? A very big din. The end of milah, the completion, this revealing, this priya, has the same din as the beginning of the milah. Matchilas milah ma'akeves avsaif milah ma'akvin by the din of priya. The uncovering is ma'akev, it holds back, it's an integral piece of the mitzvah, the tanan. Eloin atzitzin ma'akvin is milah, the shreds, the bits of skin that are ma'akev. If you don't remove them, the milah is not kosher. Is b'chzar achayfa as roi v'atara v'basar achayfa as roi v'atara, and that the Brisa concludes ve'ein oichel be'truma, and one who has such an issue that his milah is not complete, he has pieces of skin left over, he's not allowed to eat truma. That is the case, that is what it means. The priya is removing the top layer, and that is how we're seeing it's an integral part of the milah. And tomorrow we'll pick up understanding why indeed in the midbar they not actually do the mitzvah of milah.